Good evening, I'm Anna Kalczyńska and you're watching World News Tonight, live from Warsaw. Peace cannot be conditional, says President Volodymyr Zelensky, responding to unmeetable demands put forward by Vladimir Putin. London coordinates an accelerated military aid for Ukraine paired with tightening sanctions on Russia. More on that in just a moment, but first, let's take a look at the latest headlines. Viktor Orban listed what he wants from Brussels, a union, but without Ukraine. Largest crowds in decades attend anti-government protests in Serbia. And if you happen to be a Polish-American Hollywood star, you are kindly invited to a military training in Poland. We will train you, says Prime Minister Donald Tusk. The coalition of the willing is now moving to an operational phase, says British Prime Minister, urging to apply collective pressure to Kremlin. The Ukraine ceasefire deal is still on the table, with Donald Trump moderately optimistic despite Vladimir Putin ramping up demands. However, if the peace deal is not reached, large-scale sanctions and tariffs on Russia are still possible. Marek Stil reports.
Mr. President,
While Donald Trump is still hopeful of a positive response from Moscow.
I feel that Russia is going to make a deal with us, I hope.
The British Prime Minister urged a group of 25 leaders to defend a peace deal that might be reached in Ukraine through a coalition of the willing.
We agreed we will keep increasing the pressure on Russia, keep the military aid flowing to Ukraine, and keep tightening restrictions on Russia's economy to weaken Putin's war machine and bring him to the table.
On Friday, Vladimir Putin said the idea of a ceasefire was correct and that Russia supported it. But he laid out a set of issues that needed to be resolved before the truce would come into force.
Now we'll let Russia show its true intentions. Do they really want peace, or are they just empty words to prolong the talks? Now, this pressure must be exerted, pressure both economic and political on Russia to achieve a just peace.
One of the issues Putin laid out were Ukrainian soldiers in the Russian Kursk region. Putin offered to spare them if only they laid down their arms.
For the effective implementation of the U.S. president's call, a corresponding order from the military political leadership of Ukraine is necessary for its military units to lay down their arms and surrender.
Steve Witkoff, who led the negotiations in Moscow on Thursday, had to wait 8 hours to meet with Putin, Sky News reported. Little has so far been disclosed following the late-night talks.
If the Russians don't agree, it means that they don't agree not with our proposal, but specifically with President Trump's proposal.
The proposal includes several provisions pushed through by the Ukrainians. They concern the exchange of prisoners of war and the return of abducted Ukrainian children to their homeland.
Many people these days do not have experience with Soviet diplomacy anymore, but the Soviet diplomacy approach is what we are seeing. So you say yes, but what you mean is no, and then you say yes, but there's a little nuance, and the little nuance is Ukraine has to give up, and then I may be ready for ceasefire and peace. So I do not expect Putin to agree with anything.
The question now is what Donald Trump will do if it becomes clear that the intention to end the war is simply not there.
Putin is playing like he's the victim here, demanding security guarantees so that the Ukrainians won't attack his troops. This is absolutely absurd, and the Trump White House needs to bring the hammer of economic sanctions down on Moscow if they continue to play games like this.
Hello, everybody.
Donald Trump has threatened Russia with large-scale sanctions and tariffs if a peace deal is not reached.
And what was the reaction of Ukraine's government to Starmer summit? Let's go live to our correspondent in Kyiv, Oz Katerji. Good evening, Oz. President Zelensky held a press conference recently. So what did he have to say?
Yeah, he gave a wide-ranging press conference with questions from reporters earlier on Saturday, touching on many things. One of the things he touched upon is President Trump said that Ukrainian troops were surrounded, and he refuted that, saying Ukraine was still fighting in the Kursk region. They were not surrounded, and said that he further warned that Moscow was accumulating forces near Kursk, near Sumy, and planning further attacks on Ukrainian territory in Sumy. So a warning there and disputing some of the things that Putin was saying as well about Ukrainian troops in the Kursk region. He also went further. He wanted, in response to the Starmer conference, he wanted allies to give a clear position on security guarantees rather than just the kinds of words that are going around right now. He's welcoming those words, but again, he wants more clear positions on this, firm action, so that he has that in his hand in these negotiations with Russia, should they happen. So he also spoke about the territories discussion, about whether Ukraine would be discussing the exchange of territories with Russia. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
The question of territories is complicated. It must be discussed after the ceasefire agreement at the discussion table. The red lines should be announced right away. If the American and Russian sides discuss these issues, let them talk. Our position is that we will not recognize Ukrainian occupied territories as Russian under any circumstances.
So he was clearly saying that even if they accept not fighting over this territory, that the government's position, that Kyiv's position, will maintain that these territories are Ukrainian. That is something the Russians are certainly not going to like to hear. However, this is going to be the position of the Ukrainian going forward, Ukrainian government going forward in these negotiations. Back to you in the studio.
From Kyiv, Oz Katerji, thank you so much. Peace comes at a price, and if it's up to Russia to grant it, the price is measured in human lives. 1 person was killed and 5 were injured in an overnight strike on Kherson as the Russian military put pressure on the negotiating teams. Ukraine's defense ministry reported shooting down 130 Iranian-made drones. Russia also launched 2 ballistic missiles. Piotr Miszczuk reports.
This is what's left of the house of Valentina, a Kherson resident whose husband died in an overnight Russian airstrike.
I called my neighbor and she said it was your house that was hit, and I realized that it was Serhiy who was killed.
It's not the first time someone from her immediate family died at war.
My youngest son went missing near Kurakovo, so my older son got a draft deferment, but then he was killed. Now my 2 sons are gone. Everything is damaged, the summer kitchen and the garage. All the rooms in the house are damaged. 2 rooms, the corridor, the kitchen, everything. After the first explosion, shrapnel and plaster flew at me. I saw the fire burning through the window. I immediately called for help. Then we tried to get out because my door was jammed by the explosion. And now there are more explosions.
In the overnight strikes, the Russian military targeted 14 regions in Ukraine, including the city of Kryvyi Rih, where 14 people were wounded in the Russian attacks.
The door was knocked out. It was lying there. The window in the kitchen was smashed. The living room, the bathroom are also damaged. But thank God we are alive.
The strikes on Kherson's residential area also damaged people's houses. Out of 178 drones launched by Russians, Ukrainian forces managed to shoot down 130. 1 drone destroyed a 10-story building in the center of Chernihiv.
We heard an explosion. We ran to the children and took them away. I looked out the window and saw several points of fire. A car was burning near us. It was burning a little bit at first. It was my car, so I ran outside, and when I got there, I saw that the car was burning badly. I saw that the windows on our side of the house were broken, and also in my apartment.
Russian attacks on Ukraine linger, despite Putin claiming he's open to talks about a 30-day cessation of hostilities, a US proposal that Ukraine has already agreed to.
Tens of thousands of protesters converged on Serbia's capital Belgrade on Saturday for what could be the largest single rally since the start of an anti-corruption protest movement. The demonstration was sparked by the deadly collapse of a railway station roof in the city of Novi Sad last November. Our correspondent, Don Arleth, is on the scene, and here's his report.
We're here in Belgrade tonight, where literally hundreds of thousands of people have gathered here from around the country. Many people taking a long journey to the capital here to show their disagreement with the government and actually protest corruption here in Serbia. Now, these protests have been going on for 3.5 months, and they have stemmed from that tragic collapse of a canopy at a Novi Sad train station. And of course, people are blaming the government for corrupt practices and simple incompetence. And now they're not letting this go because they say that the corruption is so deeply embedded in the government that something has to change. Now, largely these protests here in Belgrade have been very, very peaceful. We've seen hundreds of thousands of people march throughout the streets today, of course, blowing whistles, blowing horns, but there was one incident in which a car actually plowed into a group of protesters and 3 people were injured. Now, just behind me here, there is off in the distance is the presidential palace, and just beyond me on this side are hundreds of riot police in readiness in case they need to crack down on the crowds here in the streets. The police are coming along here trying to get the protesters to vacate in front of the Parliament building, which is off to my right. And well, we'll see. These marches continue in the city, and of course, we'll see the culmination. This is probably, most likely, surely, the biggest protest that we've seen in these 3.5 months. And of course, like I mentioned, hundreds of thousands of people have come to the capital to protest their corrupt government led by President Alexander Vučić. Reporting from Belgrade, Don Arleth, TVP World.
15th of March is a national holiday in Hungary. It is also a day when politicians rally support. This time was no different, with 2 major demonstrations in Budapest, one in support of Viktor Orban and the other of Peter Magyar, the leader of the Tisza party, who is challenging Orban's 15-year-long grip on the country. Our correspondent Paweł Trzaskowski was there and has more details. Hello, Paweł. So what were the messages delivered today?
Well, the day started with Viktor Orban delivering a state address, and among the recurring themes of more sovereignty from the European Union and no Ukraine in the European bloc, the Hungarian Prime Minister also spoke about the corruption. I would actually like you to listen to a fragment of this speech.
After this celebrational gathering today comes the spring cleaning. The bed bugs live through the winter. We will eliminate the financial machinery which bought politicians, judges, journalists with corrupted dollars.
Viktor Orban spoke about corruption because corruption is one of the main reasons why his party Fidesz is losing support, and it is losing support to a newly established Tisza party. It was founded exactly a year ago on the 15th of March by a former prominent Fidesz politician Peter Magyar. And Tisza also held a demonstration today in Budapest, and I would like you to listen to some of the voices of people who attended this anti-government demonstration.
We would like to let Viktor Orban to go. It was enough. It was enough, yes. So that's why we are here.
It's Orban Viktor's most famous political opponent, Peter Magyar, having a demonstration here today, and we are expecting a lot of people. As you can see, it's already filling up the space, and it's like 1.5 hours left until the demonstration even starts. So we are optimistic and we are happy.
Demonstration, yeah. This Peter Magyar, this change revolution.
I also managed to speak to Zoltan Tar, vice chair of the Tisza party, and he told me about the challenges that his party has to face. Please listen to this fragment.
One of the biggest challenges that this current power, Orban's government, is doing everything what is in its power to somehow control and limit our activities. They also go after people who openly state that they want change and who say that they would like to belong to the Tisza movement. That is one of the greatest challenges because obviously everyone is worried about his or her own existence, and this government is very, very particular in going after people one by one.
Currently, TISA is leading some polls ahead of Fidesz, a feat unseen in Hungarian politics since Viktor Orban took power in 2010. But after 15 years of domination and consolidating power, these polls show that some Hungarians would like to see some change. Back to the studio.
From Budapest, Paweł Trzaskowski, thank you so much. The ongoing dispute between Greenlanders, the US President Donald Trump, and Denmark continues. The potential value and the very nature of the resources present in this strategic territory are subject of interest. Sonia Agata-Biszczan reports from Greenland.
Greenland has been receiving a lot of attention lately, mainly due to its March parliamentary elections and Donald Trump's interest in this Arctic island. However, there are many other interesting things about Greenland. One of them, its wealth of mineral resources.
Minerals constitute basically what we have in the mountain. Within these minerals, there are also what we call these rare earth elements. They're locked within these minerals.
Greenland is Denmark's self-governing territory, and roughly 1/3 of its budget is dependent on subsidies from Denmark. Some say that the path towards financial independence could be through minerals, and in particular, rare earth elements.
All rare earth elements is present in Greenland in various grades, in various compositions, or in various minerals. And these rare earth elements are vital to what we call the green transition. Otherwise, you won't be able to make super strong magnets that you will need, for instance, for a wind turbine or for an electric vehicle.
Greenland has about 3 deposits that could potentially make this business case. However, not all that glitters is gold, as the industry and surrounding infrastructure are yet to evolve.
The government wants minerals to be a third pillar of industry. I mean, tourism and fisheries and mining. I think that can be done, but it takes. It's not something that's done tomorrow or next year.
Ownership of minerals is primarily in Greenland's domain. Under the Self-Governing Act, if Greenland makes up to the equivalent of 10 million euro, it gets to retain the full amount. However, in the event of surplus, Denmark gets to cut its subsidy by half of that extra amount. At present, Denmark's annual subsidy to Greenland amounts to roughly $570 million. From Nuuk, for TVP World, Sonia Agata-Biszczan.
Who wouldn't want to play James Bond? If you happen to hold dual nationality, Polish and American, you might be best suited for the job, as Poland offers military training to all adult men. This is exactly the case of Jesse Eisenberg, American Hollywood actor who recently got the Polish passport. But affection for his ancestors' land has just been put to a surprising test. Aisha Abachi tells the story.
Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk started the weekend with a bit of humor. The subject of his humor, Jesse Eisenberg, the American actor who recently became a Polish citizen.
I got citizenship. The president personally gave it to me last week. It was amazing. And
oh my goodness!
And it was a great, it was a great honor. I've been trying for a year and a half, and then I get it. And the next day, I open the news, or I look on the news. No one opens news, and not anymore. And the top story was Poland now requires all males to participate in military training.
Appearing on The Tonight Show, starring Jimmy Fallon on March 13th, the 41-year-old actor joked about the coincidence. Eisenberg, whose Jewish ancestors immigrated to the United States from Poland and Ukraine, decided to apply for Polish citizenship after filming the Oscar-nominated movie A Real Pain in Poland. On an exclusive interview with TVP World, he called this movie a love letter to Poland.
It occurred to me while I was there that there are so many Polish people who are doing far more to memorialize my family history than I've ever done. And it made me feel that much more connected to the country and made me feel that much more emotionally invested to connecting with Polish people.
However, his distress might have been caused by the recent announcements made by the Polish government in line with its deterrence policy. Poland's prime minister said on Tuesday that the country aims to put 100,000 volunteers through military training in 2027 as part of its efforts to build a force of reserve soldiers.
We certainly understand that environments that are under threat, if there is a civil defense
if there's policies, procedures, plans, understanding of what should happen, that this itself serves as a massive deterrent. Is it merit? Is it warranted? Is it absolutely necessary right now? Probably not. But you don't prepare for a crisis when it's weeks away. You prepare for a crisis when it's years or months away.
Poland's new defense initiative will offer military training on a voluntary basis to all men over 18, though details of its implementation are still being finalized.
All of these activities, support for Ukraine, planning for the future, engaging Europe, increasing spending in Europe and in individual countries, as well as the European Union's investment in security, mean that we are bolstering the resilience, strength and defense capabilities of NATO's eastern flank.
Nevertheless, the Prime Minister took a moment to lighten the mood with some playfulness.
Drogi Jesse, naprawdę nie ma się czego obawiać. Te szkolenia są dobrowolne, także przyjeżdżaj do Polski.
And even offered Mr. Eisenberg new career opportunities.
Tak cię tutaj wytrenujemy, że rolę następnego Jamesa Bonda masz w kieszeni.
Reporting for TVP World, I'm Aisha Baji.
The British Prime Minister says military planning of securing the peace deal for Ukraine enters its operational phase. Efforts to secure just and lasting peace bring together partners from across the European Union, but not only Canada, Australia and New Zealand, with backing from others, including Japan. To discuss the potential might of this coalition, we're joined now by Adjunct Professor of International and Public Affairs, Columbia University School of International and Public Affairs, Tanya Domi. Good evening.
Good evening.
So the coalition may be willing, but whether it is really operational and capable remains to be seen. According to some experts, Donald Trump's position has not changed so far, and unless it changes, the coalition should struggle to get off the ground. So how much interrelated actually remains the coalition of the willing with Donald Trump's position of the so-called backstop here in Europe?
With regard to Europe in general, I do believe that this past week, Mr. Trump has called out the EU for being an enemy of the United States, and including an initiative to apply tariffs to European wines and liqueurs, as an example. So he's really coming at the EU in a really belligerent manner, as far as I'm concerned, but that's pretty consistent with his history. He had a very difficult relationship with Angela Merkel during his first administration. I'm not surprised by this, and I expect him to double down.
So we hear that overall we are successfully gathering political and military momentum, said Keir Starmer today, but he also added that new commitments were underway without saying what commitments exactly. So what instruments are in possession right now, are at the coalition's disposal? What instrument of
and you're talking about
Russia?
Yes, you're talking about the coalition with respect to Ukraine? Exactly, or just in coalition with Europe in general?
No. I'm talking about the coalition of the willing, that is, the countries that are willing to put pressure on Russia in securing the peace deal with Ukraine.
Right. Well, it does not, as far as I'm concerned, and in most of the public discussions, Mr. Trump has aligned himself more with Russia than with the EU. Now, there was a meeting with the Prime Minister of UK, and also his own Secretary of Defense has met with the Secretary General, Mark Rutte, and apparently in private conversations and publicly, the Secretary of Defense has definitely offered his support to NATO. And when Rutte met with President Trump, he reiterated, according to Rutte, Trump reiterated his support for Article 5, in defense of Article 5 within NATO. But in the previous week, 2 weeks ago, what has happened is that the U.S. has given more support to Russia and has withdrawn, including electronic surveillance, and has lifted sanctions on Russia. So I do not see a positioning of the United States right now is very, it seems to weigh more in Russia's favor than with regard to Ukraine itself and what's happening in Ukraine. And the White House has not issued any new statements about what, in fact, has changed about the U.S. position on Ukraine. So there hasn't been any new statements to that effect.
So let us change the subject now to Serbia, where the largest protests in decades took place today. Alexander Vučić, a populist who has been in power for 12 years as prime minister or president, is being challenged by a rally of youngsters, but not only, all different kinds of people who oppose him and challenge him. So the demands haven't changed. So we still hear the demands of a release of documents and also accountability for those responsible for the tragedy in Novi Sad. So what are the options, according to you, for the Serb protest right now?
Well, I think that the options are first of all, let me just say it's an unbelievable situation that nobody could have predicted. I, in fact, have been working on the Balkans for 30 years, and there is no precedent for this. This echoes the times that the Milosevic was the leader of the country, and the young people, including high school students who started these demonstrations, has continued to build, and it is throughout the entire country. Nobody is stopping, and the president, Vučić, has not been able to quell these demonstrations. It has absolutely flummoxed him. The options for the demonstrators is they're demanding accountability. And the issue is about the endemic corruption that resulted in the deaths of 15 people in November that were killed in the train station in Novi Sad when a canopy fell on the train. And that has not relented. I mean, not only has it not relented, it has gotten bigger. And so what has happened with Mr. Vučić is he offered up his prime minister, who resigned in late January, and the mayor of Novi Sad also resigned. So political blood has been, so to speak, shed by the president and his party, the Progressive Party, and the people are rising with these young people. And in my conversations with people in Belgrade, they are enthralled, they are thrilled, and according to accounts I'm hearing, is that the EU has more or less behind the scenes warned Mr. Vučić, if you turn on guns against the people, you are done. But a lot of people believe on the street, and that are analysts on Serbia, they believe that President Vučić has run his game, and this game is not going to deliver a win for him. He is essentially, in the view of many people, he is politically finished, especially if he turns to violence.
Tanya Domi, thank you so much for being with us, madam. So that concludes this edition of World News Tonight. Thank you so much for watching, but please stay tuned to TVP World for more news and continuous updates.